Good morning. My name is Martin Drapeau. I'm from McGill University, and I'm very happy to see so many people registered for this event. I believe we now have over 500 registrations, and I'm confident that this will be an absolutely fascinating conference. Although planning this, I must say, has been quite the challenge. Our idea was to get brilliant people together, our speakers and yourselves and the participants, so that we can talk. We felt, and perhaps some of you can relate to this, that our society and our universities have become quite polarized. On the one hand, there's a tremendous push for EDI initiatives, which I believe, or at least I hope, come from a good place and then aim to make our society better for everyone. But in some cases, some have argued that these initiatives have also led to censorship and to wasting money and ironically, to some people or groups of people feeling excluded. And on the other end of what we could call a spectrum, I suppose, there are those who believe that academic freedom is important, which is undeniably true because universities should be about curiosity and discovery, and some will say it's about the truth. But either way, I think we can all agree that they are or should be a place to discuss, a place to debate ideas, all ideas, no matter how absurd they may seem. But some people also feel that academic freedom has gone or is going too far. Now, I myself am not an expert on these topics. I became interested in them when I started really paying attention to what was happening in my program, in my department, faculty, and university, and something seemed wrong. Some people appeared to have firm and very set ideas about academic freedom, but much more so, I believe, about EDI, so equity, diversity, and inclusion. Some felt it was okay to take the moral high ground, and then, of course, the result was that some people appeared to become more and more radicalized, while others, perhaps more moderate in their views, were afraid to speak. I started this presentation by saying that organizing this conference was a challenge, and it really was. I reached out to many people, perhaps especially EDI representatives, and many, if not most, just said no, and that's truly unfortunate. Other people I contacted were afraid to speak, and so they said no, and we need to respect that. Then there were those who also said yes at first, but were then contacted by colleagues who told them that they should withdraw from the conference and not present, and so unfortunately, very sadly, they agreed to that, and they removed themselves. And then, of course, I received some critical emails, simply for organizing this conference. I take all this to mean, and I guess that's the bottom line, I take it all to mean that we really needed this conference. I mean, isn't there some kind of value, true value, in being curious about the world, about the point of view of others? Isn't it worth the effort to think things through, to talk and to improve our thinking through dialogue and through debate? And I think there is. There definitely is. And this is what this conference is all about. It's also, I would say, an opportunity for us to serve as models. I've often been told, and I often see in my classroom, students who are no longer dare to speak. So I wanted us to be role models today and show that it's possible to talk to each other, that it's possible to disagree without demonizing the other person, that it's also possible and even very healthy to question oneself and to question others and to debate and engage in dialogue. So as you know, we're going to have speakers during this conference as well as roundtable discussions. We made a tremendous effort to choose participants who will have different points of view and who are going to address sometimes difficult topics in a way that's both intelligent and critical. Sometimes it might look like a debate, and that's perfectly fine because the university is exactly for that. So let's get started with our first speaker, Professor Yves Gingras, who's a full professor in the Department of History at the Université du Québec à Montréal. He's also the scientific director of the Science and Technology Observatory. He was part of the special commission which examined the state of academic freedom in Quebec universities. And some of you might be familiar with this. It was the results of this investigation that led to Bill 32, which is a recent bill that was passed here in Quebec, which protects and promotes academic freedom. So here he is. I give the floor to Professor Gingras, whom I thank very warmly for spending this time with us.
In the specific case of Quebec, everything exploded in October 2020. It started from an article from Isabelle HxA in La Presse, who would remind us that the student was always right, and it was the scandal to the Verusca Lieutenant Duval, who was attacked by students, and the Ottawa University in this really one reason, she removed her without any inquiry, and this brought a big scandal. So many articles started to be written in the newspaper. Pierre Trudel is a lawyer, is a teacher at the University of Montreal, the word police at the university. Chantal Pouliot, who is one of my colleagues in education in Laval University, and she's a member also with me on the commission of the Academic Freedom, also had a text at the same time on October 25th in La Presse, who say, let's defend the university freedom. After that, on the TV5 World in France, we've talked about the this debate on the Ottawa University on the nigger word, etc., etc. So even me, I've committed many texts that was titled, "What's the University? The Inside Enemies of the Freedom University, and When Judgment is Removed." So this was a form that was like a collective hysterical case at the university that weren't able or didn't want to take any decision, which it's really simple: class management and teaching, not censure. So this context started not by chance. It started in the Ottawa University. We've seen others, but not as bad in Concordia. And like Martin said in his opening words, we had some in McGill University also. So we may guess that this started in the Francophone University, did he say? And the Ottawa University this should be a bilingual university, though. So the meaning of the French and the English concentrated. And whatever we say about this, stats shows that the strategies, elementary strategies, know that there's a great cultural university between the rest of Canada and Quebec. French Quebec has a French attitude, more open, more free at a real academic debate. There's no word that are not censored. There's many people for different complex reasons. They don't understand these elementary distinctions. So at the Ottawa University, just to calm the rector that was really incompetent, put in place a commission, and he named the Bastarache judge. We had a goal of credibility, and he brought a report on the academic freedom that was given to the Ottawa University in November 2021, and brought a lot of controversy that would show an aspect that was well debated at the university side, and even people in the report that had a lot of pressures. And there's a second version of this Bastarache report in which we removed lexic that, not lexic, but annex that had things that had to be removed because of different kind of pressure brought to this report. So this brought in 2022 of a synthesis of the University of Ottawa professors, a book that was titled Freedom That Were Beaten Up, if you say. So as you see, there is a lot of excitement that was brought. And if we make an inquiry of the number of newspaper articles, what's interesting is between October 2020 and January 21, so the 4 or 5 first months of this Ottawa controversy, we had about 100 articles in French in the French newspapers like Le Devoir, La Presse, Le Droit in Ottawa, and only about 10 articles or texts in English. So this shows you right away that the Francophones thought this to be a scandal, what happened in Ottawa, and like the English media thought that this was absolutely normal, no consequence at all in a type of event. So that's what brought to the government from Quebec. We think that's centre droite, we could consider. Diversity in university is not really good. So we need to have a commission, independent commission, to recognize the freedom, academic freedom in the university. So the way they formed this sentence, like free academic freedom and the academic freedom, yeah, academic freedom means if we copy it, we say academic freedom, but freedom academic. So that's not the good term. It's university freedom. So they called it academic freedom in the university, because higher, it's not university. So if they would have said university freedom, it would have been clear, but they said academic freedom in the university, and they consider CGEP, but it's not part of the mandate of the commission. It's a bit complicated, but I'm going to explain at the end to talk about university freedom. I'm talking from the university. I'm not talking about CGEPs. CGEPs, it's more complicated, and if we have questions on CGEP, I will answer them with pleasure at the end. But within the report of the commission, we had a note at the end of page on the CGEP. So this commission was set in place, and this commission had 4 members, all people in university, and the president was the vice president of the University of Quebec in Chicoutimi, but also Alexandre Cloutier was ex-minister of the government of the Quebec party, so he knows the insides of the governments. And also we've named a student who are doing their doctorate, José Moret, chemist, and she's given class. So Chantal and Aline Nibawe, who is teaching education in Abitibi in Quebec. So they're real professors of the university that they had from the minister, teaching ministry, the mission. The goal of the commission was to reaffirm the mission of the universities. I'm going to get back to this, and to determine the principles of the academic freedom. Because we all talk about academic freedom, but the question is, what does this hold, this academic liberty? Everything is not academic freedom. So to remind them the responsibility of the universities and all the actors, the stakeholders, who's responsible of that? What are their duties? And it was to give to the government some kind of something to set in place in all the establishments. Yes, without their big discourse of the importance of academic freedom, they wouldn't defend it. The McGill case, Ottawa case is really clear. That's what it shows on that subject. So we were also invited in this mandate to give a descriptions of the actual situation. And in the report, we have a page that describe in the annex in 2022 or 2021, the whole of the intervention throughout the Canada that brought this as an issue, this university freedom. So to do so, we asked the community to produce documents. So we had 47 memoirs And we asked 23 of these authors of these memoirs to present them in a public audience that was filmed, recorded on YouTube for 5 days. So we've met different type of student associations, rectors, unions, professors that give individual testimonies. And what was interesting regarding what Martin said in his opening is that we even received, in these 5 days of audience, we accepted to have them off camera for people who would like to share their testimony, but people we can understand and respect. But this was pretty bizarre to do this in a closed door. So this shows a bit the context of the hysterical context in these times. In addition to receive 47 memoirs, we had 2 surveys throughout the whole of the teachers and the students. So this commission, who worked from March 21 and brought their memoir in December 21, really went around everything regarding this question in an independent way. Some of the examples, just simply to give you an idea of the situation. In the surveys, we were told by the people answering that 60% of the professors were saying that it was already censored and they wouldn't use certain words. So there's no problem with this, but the people are conscious not to use these words. It doesn't say that these words are bad, but they're conscious, they're careful of using certain words. So the most important, as for me, is 1/3, 35% of the members saying that are censored, avoiding teaching certain subject. In university, we shouldn't have any censored subjects. This is where we should bring issues and discuss and argument on any kind of questions without exceptions. And even on this, from the students, 28% affirmed that would censorship themselves in their studies. They don't feel free of talking about anything. Even if they could seem naive, they should be able to talk about this in university. Where we see a difference between the professors and the students is on the legitimacy of using any kind of words on the academic way. So no one's insulting anybody. In the academic world, we take words to express a context. So surprisingly enough, 1/3 of the students, or even 1/4, that would admit that certain words should never be mentioned, whatever the context. So there's a big difference here between the teachers and the students. So these survey are confirmed in the United States by another survey that was done a few weeks ago, and it would confirm also the censorship level in research, different types of expressions from the students. So we can't doubt this, that there is a context of self-censorship. It's pretty evident. So once again, when we talk about the role of the expertise, there's a difference between the teachers and the students. Obviously, 9 out of the 10 consider that we should talk in the university any type of subjects, whatever the gender, identity of gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, and I would add, to be funny, the color of their hair. There is no reason at all to limit to one kind of personality or physical characteristic the legitimacy of talking and discussions. But 1/4 of these students consider that we shouldn't talk of a certain subject if we are not ourselves member of a certain community. So we see identity, community, 1/4 of the students. So is this 1/4, this minority is a lack of reflection, and when they'll be more mature, they will find that this is an absurd position, but it's still 1/4 of the students who think like that. But the 3/4 of the others are well aware that any debate, any discussions made by rational people, not because of physical characteristics of the individuals. Also, to show that professors also weren't really thinking up until this 2020 year, well, at least in Quebec, about the academic freedom. Most of the teachers ignored if the university has had any clause to defend this university freedom. So our report came to the conclusion that we've said that to talk about university freedom, which I'll get to there pretty soon, we need to remind what's a university. So curiously, the mission of the university in Quebec wasn't defined in any law that would define the precise mission of the university. The only place where there's a law is the law of Université du Québec, who were created in 1968, the universities of Quebec, that would contain for this university the mission of the university. But the whole of the universities was taken for granted. Well, so we've defined it in a precise way. The mission of the university is the production and transmission of knowledge through research activities, creation, teaching, and services to the collectivity. So it's the mission that everybody knows, like by heart, if you want, but we suggest to the government to put this in a law. After that, the more difficult part, but even then with people in the academic milieu would say, what is the university freedom? So in the report, we defined the university freedom. We consider that this includes the right outside of any doctrinal constraint, the freedom of any discussions, freedom of research, creation, and publication, freedom to express your opinion on the establishment and the system in which the beneficiary works for this freedom, and not to be under the censorship of the institution, and to take part freely to any kind of activities, professional and academic activities. This is really broad, but we need to remind that this university freedom need to be there with the rigorous depending on different domain, like the consensus of methodologies of bringing back, like in sociology, are not the same than physics, but there's still a scientific community who do have norms, and we'll talk about that maybe a little later. Another really important thing, and it's misunderstood often by the student, is that who are the beneficiaries of the university freedom? So we needed to define the mission of the university, what is the freedom at the university, but who will be the beneficiaries of this university freedom? It's always nice to say, yes, we're a community, this university communitary. There's tons of communitaries, but who are the members of these communities? So the beneficiaries, we don't, I'm a professor, someone is a lecturer. So if we talk about the state or the status, this is not good, because the status will change. A student, a doctoral student, he's a student, but we may ask him to do a class, so he's going to become a lecturer. So to avoid this, we've defined this according to the function. So the beneficiary of the university freedom, regarding our opinion of the committee, people who do activities that will contribute to the accomplishment of the university mission without regards of the milieu and the way of production and diffusion of the knowledge. So this is important. Means that when a professor talks on the radio and it's within his expertise, well, he is under the university freedom, so he cannot be constrained or censored from the institute. This is a direct consequences to the beneficiary of the freedom of university. They're a short sentence, but they are really, really important to maximize this university freedom of the people who are beneficiaries of this liberty. So some people would say, yes, but where is the university freedom of the students? And this is a great example of confusions. The university freedom is defined from the mission of the university. So the student, he is the beneficiary of that mission. So he has the freedom to learn. He doesn't have the university freedom. He's not a teacher or researcher. He's someone being taught. So he's got the freedom of learning to be able to discuss in class of any kind of subject, can't be ostracized by the teacher or the student in the same class. But this is not university freedom. The students have the freedom of learn, and the teacher of the university freedom within the framework of the university. Why a law? Well, at the beginning, people were saying, the rectors were unanimously, they said, we don't need a law, everything is doing great in the university, freedom is defended by the rectors and directors. This was a big lie. Anybody who would see clearly and read the newspaper. So why a law? Why a law? Because in Quebec, it's the first time that we had a uniform vision of all these establishments. We need to know that the McGill professors and the professor of les hautes études commerciales are not unionized. So the universities that are unionized, like UQAM, they could put in their collective agreement a clause on the freedom of university. So unionized teachers, they have something to defend this freedom, but non-unionized teachers, they have nothing to fight with. Second reason, even if the union can have something, when you make a grievance to the union, it's the union who decides if the grievances is accepted or not. So imagine a union that would be directed by some people who thinks we exaggerate this freedom in university, so they wouldn't defend the professor. So with a law, we have this mechanism that is apart from the union, and this is really important. The other advantage of a law is by defining the university freedom, we need to define the mission of the university. So a certain number of professors, a minority, let's say 60s, that wrote a letter against the law 32, they didn't read it and they didn't understand that to define the university freedom, we needed to define in the law the mission of the university. And I think that this is something really important, that those who are against law 32, they didn't understand it because they never read it probably or thought about it. So the other thing is, with a law, if we ever go in front of the judge or tribunals, if a university would like to block some kind of discussion that was legitimate, we could go to the Supreme Court and saying that there's a law that makes that we can't be censored. So we have the union, the law, and the law is the basic if we need to defend up until Supreme Court. This is the law 32. We brought it December 14, 2021. We gave our report. The project of law 32 was brought to l'Assemblée nationale April 6, 2022. Parliamentary commission, so like with the opposition deputy, heard the rectors to say that we don't need a law. Everything is going so well. And we asked the member of the commission, which I was part, me and Alexandre Cloutier, the president, we testify the importance of having a law against the opinion of the rectors, demonstrating that they weren't the reality. And this law was adopted on June 3rd, 2022. And we need to notice what's really important when we understand the Quebec democracy. This is a law that was adopted without any opposition. Normally, opposition would oppose. Here, it's really interesting. Liberals voted for this project. Parti Québécois voted for this law. And the 8 members, people elected from Québec Solitaire, they're a bit more on the left and a bit more sensible from those who don't really understand the specificity of this university freedom. They just abstain, but they didn't oppose that law. They just abstain from voted. This is a great sign that even them to oppose a law on university freedom was exaggerated, but they wanted to please the left wing, extreme left wing. They just abstained to vote. So without any opposition, this law was adopted. But we need to remind that, yes, we've defined the university freedom, but now we can't go on the other extremes. I think that we have people, because they're naivety or strategy, thinks that as soon as you are a professor, you can say absolutely anything in any context and we will be under the university freedom. This is ridiculous. No, the teacher, the professor doesn't have this liberty totally in class. He's limited by the programs, the content of the courses, and also by the professional orders. If you're a psychologist, you have constraint. You can't say anything. If you are the doctor, you can't say anything. But we're not limited by the these community with code like anthropologists or French sociologists because they're a savant society, they can control what I say, but professional orders regarding the law, yes, they do put some barriers and limits. And this was demonstrated in course with different judgment that I could give you examples of. So the university freedom will protect the society, but not only the professor. This is not a corporatist freedom. It's a freedom that assures the mission of the university. In return, she is for the wellness of the society by bringing knowledge that was robust because it resists to the critics, in which they are used in many different cultural ways and economical ways, and they can't be hindered in their project, whatever they are. Now, I put this under like a question mark because this wasn't really discussed often, and it doesn't really apply in Quebec or in Canada, but in the States, is the university freedom supposes a public or totally private? So a private university, could this make a difference? So, but it doesn't apply in Quebec or in Canada because the universities are public. But in the States, this would apply because we have religious private universities. And in this case, this could bring a problem that I mentioned, but I'm not going to develop this theme. So we need to distinguish the professor, the simple professor who has the maximum liberty, even when he says things that are debated on the scientific example, like Professor Paul Héroux at McGill is expert on electromagnetic wave, but he's critic of the G5 and he is about on the conspiracy theory. But we can't, even if we don't agree with him on the interpretation that he makes, but he has the right to express himself, so we can't censor him. because he talks about things that goes against the consensus. It's a debate. He's marginal, is minoritary, but you need to use your reasoning and your common sense to decide. But there is a confusion that appears often, is that the direction level, like where executive, rector, someone who represents the institution, his discourse will imply the image of the institution. So he needs to be loyal, which isn't the normal professor. So there is a difference. So some people said that when we fire a rector is censorship. Potter in 2017, Andrew Potter, there was a controversy that we had limited his academic freedom or liberty. I think it's false, and I have written in the Devoir an article that was demonstrated that no, we didn't limit his academic liberty, because he was part of a center, but he just he could have became a professor again to continue to insult the people from Quebec as he did as a director. So law or medicine, they have you have a code of conduct. So doctors in university can't say absurdities on vaccination. They will use their right of practice. So we do have constraint. Another example that I'm going to talk about, and it just came a few weeks ago, is that we have professor in a social work from UQAM and other in Sherbrooke that complain in the newspapers that we've limited their university liberty because the health ministry refused to share their video on racism. This is a great example of total confusion. The work that relates from a relation on a professor and a ministry, this is a contract. So they made a contract with the ministry. They produced a document. The health ministry, they evaluated the document, and if it's not satisfied, they put it on a shelf. And this is a contractual relation. We can't say because of academic liberty to force them to share videos that are on what they call the systemic racism. This is something that their freedom of academy, they can talk about it, say it's fundamental, but they can't force the health ministry to publish a video, which I've seen some parts, and this is so simple, so ridiculous. I can have this opinion on simplicity because I have the freedom academically, but to say that we've hindered their rights of freedom, this is a great mistake, even if unions, they relayed this because they were unknown of what it really meant. So I will end by reminding that we need to distinguish the university liberty and the liberty of expression, freedom of expression. Some individuals, like at the Université de Montréal, who use an expression that's, they talk about freedom of expression in a university context. So this brings confusion. The mission of a university is the base of the university freedom. So the mission of the university implies two consequences: institutional autonomy, meaning that the government cannot force the university to have astrology programs like they did in India and many years ago. The government, they say that doctorate in astrology. So this is ridiculous. So institutional autonomy and the university liberty is to the teacher, the researcher, not the institution. So it means that it applies to the campus, the class, the research, the publication, and the university policies. The freedom of speech or expression comes out of a democratic society that has a chart like Quebec and Canada has, the charters of rights and liberty. So any individual, professor or not, any citizens has the freedom of speech. So it means that in the public space, she expresses herself freely. They can say that the earth is flat. They can't be against vaccination. And this is her freedom of speech. The example, in the beginning of the 90s, a doctor, a woman doctor that written a book says medical mafia, and she was talking about vaccines are dangerous and it gives AIDS. This is delirious, but she was a doctor. So journalists were excited to the fact that the order of doctors censored them, because the journalist doesn't understand the difference. When you are a doctor, you're under certain rules, and to say that vaccines will bring AIDS is absurd. So she lost, Madame Langto, the right of practice, and she's still doing now, being delirious on vaccines. So as a citizen, she's delirious, but she can't be at the same time doctor and bring saying silly things. You can say the earth is flat if you want, but you can't be a physics professor and give a class of 45 hours in which you demonstrate that the earth is flat. You'll have your class removed and say that you can't do this. We do have gray area. What did he say? This is a freedom of academics or expression. So in this case, we need to look more deeply if it is or not. The advantage of a professor in the university is that he is citizen and also professor. So he has two freedoms. He has freedom of speech, and the university can't censor his right of speech. But he also has the academic freedom when he talks of research, proofs, scientific arguments. So this is where we mix these freedom of speech and academic freedom. So we need to keep these two well separated. And the idea of the reports was to deduct the specificity of university liberty. Why? Because the rectors, through the commission, they tried to say that university freedom was a consequence of institutional autonomy. This is false. Institutional autonomy is one thing, but it doesn't imply at all the university freedom. We can imagine universities that are autonomous in which there is no university freedom because they'd be sanctioned from the direction. So it goes through the mission of the university, not the autonomy. The autonomy comes from the mission of, and the freedom of speech in a democratic society, it's not the same thing. And if we go back in history and we look at USSR in the 30s, they had a great academic freedom in the science, but they had no freedom of speech because we were in Russia, communist. So physicians would go to England, make research. So they had great freedom, but no freedom of speech. So these concepts may need to be well defined and well separated. Conclusion, I would say that the mission of the university to contribute to the advancement of knowledge requires total autonomy in front of interest groups concerning the methods of inquiry and the results obtained. In an open society, anybody who disagrees of the result, they can criticize it. There's a public space where you can criticize them, but each professor commits his credibility in these kinds of public interventions because the university professor, his credibility is capital. You know, if you don't need to sanction him because he will lose his credibility if he says something ridiculous. And we never should give way to different conceptual confusion by mixing up the rhetoric of EDI and the university freedom. These issues are not from the same level of actions like class action, pedagogy. This is not university freedom. If we want inclusion, well, let's find a mechanism by giving grants or educating the young and learning them to write, and they would go to university. If that's diversity, let's give grant, but we can't link this to the academic diversity. And in this commission, I was really surprised to hear people really in high places in the Commission of the Rights and Liberty. They were confusing rights and liberties with the academic liberty, probably based on ignorance of the specificity of the mission of the university. But we should stop this confusion, and we should define these concepts precisely to avoid these intellectual confusions that, as I regard, have no place in the university. So we need to defend the specific mission of the university without give place to whatever the reason, all the mantras that are in trend. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Yves. Stay with us because we'll take some questions, and you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A button. Just write your question, and so Yves, don't mind this. I'm going to take care of the questions because people sent me question also. The first question is related to the loyalty aspect side. So thank you for your presentation. It's really enlightening, useful, precise. The question is, loyalty is in the civil code. Does that mean that, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly the law. Does that mean that the duty, like the law 32 on university freedom, is a public law, surpasses this article of the duty of loyalty? This is an interesting question because there was a great study on the COPLA, the committee of the FPQU regarding the new university freedom, and 3 lawyers jurists analyzed the consequences of the law 32. So we can't go above the civil code, but what we can suggest is the formulation of the law will constrain this, because at the name of the loyalty duty, but what's loyalty? If we talk about science and we say we're afraid because of a vaccination on the kids from 2 to 5, we can't bring the duty of loyalty. But if say that l'Université Laval, okay, I'm not gonna name a university, but let's say University X is a bunch of crazy people. No. If people are delirious, or the teachers are delirious because of the expression, right? So the duty of loyalty with the law 32, a judge would say this is the academic freedom that is the issue. He can say that vaccination is not mandatory for kids between 2 to 5. He doesn't talk about the efficiency of the vaccine, but he's talking about the health, public health. So there's confusions between science, who will say the state, and the public decisions that based on many reasons. And we've seen it during the pandemic. There are a lot of the people were delirious, and many countries had different reactions to the pandemic. So we had asked in our report that they would have a clause saying that the duty of loyalty and also to fact and cause. This was too complicated to be retained, but what's there brings a separation. What is loyalty of the university? So quantum mechanic may say it's not good. No, you can't say that as a professor. So it separates the legitimacy of the university to bring the code of loyalty. And if he says that the university, and he talks about the nature of the institution, they may have problems because everything is not out of the university freedom. Another question. So a question that say, how would you explain the difference, the point of view of Quebec and the rest of Canada on the question of university freedom? I know you talked about it, but maybe elaborate a bit. Well, my sociologist comment, if you want to say, in Quebec and in Canada since I would say the 80s, it's a trend to say that we don't have the two solitudes and McLennan story of the two solitudes. This is false. Sociologically, all the studies shows that there is a difference. To go quicker, it's simpler. What we call about the woke, this tendency of saying, yeah, we've dominant is much higher in the Anglophones from the US. It's an American culture. There's a lot more American in the universities in Canada that bring this oh, we're bad, but the francophones were more like laicity, that they call it open. No, laicity is laicity. There's not a closed and an open one. Laicity is laicity. So there's a big confusion. So this culture of openness, of to debate, we like to debate. Oh, English, they say, very interesting. I went to Harvard to the States, and I know, oh, everything is great. This culture to avoid any kind of debate, this is hypocrisy, condescendence. Oh, yes, my little friends, you have your culture. So this relativism culturally is complicated, and we see it in the survey. In the report, if you go see the survey, there is a stat correlation that the rectors wanted to say, even if they don't know anything in the stats. So I intervene in the commission to say that, reminding that the survey was statistically significant on 4 variables. So there is a difference, even on the student part, between French and English, and professors English and French. So there is a difference. There is a transition. So I was professor at the University of Toronto, and at Ottawa, the clash was done between the French and the English. We don't want to say it, but we need to observe that there is a fight between it's ancient, it's important, but we're still traditionally, of course, we have French woke. This is obvious, but globally, we've seen it in the stats. Anglophones have tendency of say, oh, we can't say the nigger word, the black nigger. Why? It's the English. They don't want to say the title of the book, Nègre Blanc d'Amérique. It's the title of a book. Are we going to say N of America? No, that's the title. We need to explain to the students why and why they use that word, because he worked with the Black Panthers and tell the story. So there's a cultural difference. It's complicated. We can't deny it. We can explain it in a complicated way, but we can't deny it. So I don't have a simple explication, but it's an old, it's part of the two cultures that are still existing. We see it in the cinema. We see it on TV series. The Rock is Americans that ignores themselves, but Quebec is tradition that's closer of France and the laicity and the Law 21 and even the Law 96. In your answer, you alluded of the representativity of the survey that was made by the commission, and there's a question on that. In which measure that you, the commission, generally, you are confident that the results of the survey represent really what's happening in the Quebec University? Pardon. We need to remember, in France and in Quebec, when we have a survey to the whole of the population, so 8 million of people in Quebec. So on how many people? 1,000 the survey is. So when the rectors said that with 1,000 professors, and is it 25 or 30,000 because we have the lecturer and everything. So we said 30,000. We gave them more. We have 1,000 answers. So it's 3% of people who respond. No, 1,000 on 8 million is 0.0008%. So a survey that's representative, we need to show that it is representative. So we've shown in the report that on the distribution of the age of the professor, people who, the respondents were representative. Montreal and elsewhere, the respondents are representative, and on the disciplines and sex, masculine, feminine, they're all representative. So if someone tells me that a survey representative on 4 variables, the results are not, well, you're playing on words, because that's not the way survey works. So ours is representative, and the one of the students also. And it's curious to see that the rectors brought question on the professor, but not the students. Why? 992 students on how many? 100,000? But it's a sample done by Léger, I don't know, but so it is representative. So the results, and more so, if you've seen the recent study in the United States on the auto censorship, I think Fire said they would find similar results. So I'm fully confident of the results. So you also talk about the percentage of the professors that would say that they had censored their teaching on specific subjects. Did the commission, do you have any statistics that more precise on the domain? Like the question we're asked here is like human science. I don't have this in mind, but in the report, we will see the annex and we have all the details. Yes, but we have then in human science, the nature conscience. So science of nature, they say, oh, you with your human science. No. I'm well aware of a case that's a bio teacher, and she was stopped because she was explaining that there's male organ, estrogens, and progesterone, and we had female hormones, and she was attacked and said, no, this is social construction. So of course she was a lecturer, she wasn't a professor, she was a woman, unfortunately, and we could come on this group that would attack only the weaker people. So she was completely flabbergasted to say, it's scandalous what you're teaching. A professor of medicine who wrote, and he lost his class because he was teaching biology. So, but this is less frequent, it's understandable, but it's present in biology, less in physics. It's totally normal. But yes, there is a difference, but we find it, but the number of censorship is higher in human science and social, but it's not zero in biology, and this is surprising. Another question that talks more on the CEGEP, or we could call the college, for the Canadian participants, the nuance on CEGEP, when we talk about university freedom, we note that more and more research done in CEGEPs. Professors are not forced to do it. So the mission on university and CEGEP is different. So in which measure this university freedom that we call university freedom could apply in the college level or CEGEP in Quebec? In our report, we had a note, end of page, that's really important, in which we say at the end, we believe, even if it's not in our mandate, we didn't want to talk about CEGEP, but if we read attentively the definitions, we talk about the function of most of the elements, not all of them, because it's not in the mission of the CEGEPs, but some professors will do. So you can turn our interpretation around and say the research function that are present in the fact are protected by the academic freedom in the CEGEP. So that's why I would say in CEGEP milieu, so it's smaller because they have teaching programs in CEGEPs are more constrained than the university. So the scope of the freedom is smaller, but if he can't be censored if he writes a book of sociology from the CEGEP. So he's defined by the university liberty, but because of the CEGEP mission, that's not the same, but in whole, if you apply this, of course, you won't see a director that would censor a teacher. So it wouldn't be complicated to extend to the CEGEP, but the government limit themselves to the university. I think that, and I can tell you that I wouldn't another big commission. Just by reading the report, we can adapt it, and to serve from the CEGEP directors could use it by saying it's pretty obvious that there is a academic freedom. So it wouldn't be complicated to bring it to the CEGEP if we define the mission of the CEGEP. A question that asks that if it would be possible, and I think we're referring the last slide you presented, the question EDI, there shouldn't be confusion because there are different types of action. I think that's the terms that you mentioned. So the question is a bit on that. Could you give examples on how defending the university freedom is in conflict with the objectives of EDI? And I would add, personally, is there any way we could go over this problem? Let me be honest. I tried to put this every side I could, any kind of speech, EDI speeches, and we mentioned in the note of the report that when we look what's been said on EDI, we don't know what it means. We need to be precise. If I say equity, what does equity mean? Is it equality? And people start with equity and continue with equality, but it's not the same thing, equity and equality. So if we have 0 students at the university in physics that are indigenous, the research of Canada would say that we need 3% of indigenous. We say this is absurd because there's none. And then if we want some, we say, okay, we'll go train them, we're going to give them grants. Though there's no link between EDE and university freedom, 0. When the confusion happens is that people think there's a link. We take equity. If there's a third of these students in chemist and doctorate and a third of doctorate and a third of professor, statistically it should be the case. But this is not academic freedom. It's policies of recruiting, diversity. In my class, I told my students, am I responsible of the diversity of my class? And the answer is no. It's the university that says that you are accepted, like in psychology. I'm not. I have my class. I had students that came from everywhere. I had a lady from Maghreb. She had a veil. Haiti. You're here because the university accepted you. It's nothing with the inclusion. What does that mean? So this is a mantra that says nothing. Whatever sense you give to EDI, what does this affect my academic freedom? We're confusing the class management and pedagogy. When you say nègre blanc, I mean, it's like, oh, the student, we can't say this. Okay, calm down. Is the title of the book. I'm doing class management and teaching pedagogy. In another class that I know, we talk in Quebec of editorial that was in the Devoir, where the André Laurando, I forgot the title of this editorial, the Roi Nègre. So in the 50s, to understand what this means, I said, we can't say that. Yes, this is the title. I'm talking about the history of Quebec. So when you explain, most of the people say, oh, okay, I understand. But if you start to say, I'm calling the rector and I'm shutting on the class, no, there is no link. I don't see how we can have a link between the freedom of academic and social origins, sex, and anything. There is none. If the students they say yes, there are estrogens hormone and if you take, you're gonna have breasts. That's the way it works. We can't mix these concepts. So, and I challenge anybody to make a link and to talk about the comment who was asked. There are tensions between the two. So how can we explain the tension? Yeah, logically, concepts, there's no link, but in practice, the people who defend that, I have the respect for them, but they don't have clear ideas, because when I have these two orders, freedom of university is what I'm doing now. Some people don't agree with Gingras, and that's okay. They're going to write against me, and I don't care. It's academic debate. EDI is say, I want inclusion, diversity. So if I only have white people in my class, I want black people, yellow, indigenous. It is legitimate, but it's the government who should say, okay, we need schools, we need grants, they have to do a master, a doctorate, and after 10 years, they'll be professors. So what's the problem? But what's the link between this and the freedom? There is none. So if you make a link, it's because you have a confused mind. And our work is to say it's important. Diversity is important. Yes, we agree. A class of 15 guys is not the same dynamic than a 6 boys, 6 girls. And 15 girls is not the best idea. So you don't need a doctorate to know that diversity is useful. But there's no link between academic freedom. It's a square round. Like CRHH, they talk about inclusive excellence. This is absurd. Excellence also, it always signified exclusion. We're the best, the other one are out. So now they notice that it's incompatible with the mantra EDI. We can't say about inclusive excellence is a square circle. That doesn't exist. So we insisted too much on the excellence. This was an exclusive vision, and now we want to be open on something else. Okay, give grants to everybody. I don't care, but don't tell me that because they're poor people in my class and he is, I don't know, first generation class, that I'm not going to treat the poor people. No, I'm going to treat everybody, and I'm going to talk about the poor people and they don't eat well and they overweight. This is not grossophobia. People are confused. We need to bring things that are clear. In the commission time where you were part, you had discussions on the impact, and I think there's a link on what you just said, on the impact of the power dynamics that are present in the university on the exercise of university freedom. So the question is, they say that everybody in a university, unfortunately, they don't have the same power and liberty. So we have groups that have more difficulties. Not too long ago, Francophones in university, anyways, they didn't have a ton. McGill for a long time had quotas for Jewish people. So we can talk about a woman's case, and they didn't really have access to university. So these people throughout the years, because of a bigger opening to participate, but maybe they don't have the same liberty or same voice in the university. So the question is asking that if we want to make sure that we have more liberty, how can we take in consideration, did you take it in consideration in the commission, the fact that certain groups had less liberty? Okay. There's a confusion in the probability of intervene, the whereabouts of, and again, the academic liberty or freedom. The fact that, yes, I know this course, this speech, we have group, we find that in the Student Association of Extreme Left, no performing. You, Gingras, you're on many platforms. We don't have a lot of space to intervene, but is it because you have less space that you will stop people to talk? This is absurd. You should say, okay, you don't have enough place, so create a paper. How come the Devoir doesn't publish? Me, La Presse refused my text. Le Devoir accept them more often, so what can I do? But it's not an academic liberty, it's access to the word, and access to speech in all strategy is stratified. La Presse doesn't publish the same thing than Le Devoir, and not the same thing than Le Journal de Montréal. I write a lot, and sometimes they refuse my text because they're afraid to publish them. So I have a precise text that was refused by all the newspapers, all. They didn't want to talk about Charles Taylor. I don't mind to talk against Charles Taylor's, but my argument cited from his English text in the States, but no newspaper accepted. So am I going to complain that I have no platform? No, you confuse the academic liberty with the access. Well, if you're not a professor, you may have not enough platform. So many of these discussion are linked to the confusion and the displacement of a concept to another. Left wing, they have Ababar, a left-wing newspaper. It's not in Le Journal de Montréal. But if you're rich and you can create 12 reviews or 12 papers, you have more platform. But it's not the academic freedom. When we had less Jewish people because there was a limit at McGill, well, it meant that they weren't admitted, and the Jewish people, they had their own review. So don't confuse the democratic society that's hierarchically, and I still hear it from the students, they confuse the authority and power. I tell them, I'm a professor in university, you're in my class. Obviously, if you agree to come in my class, I'm give you the note. So if I say fail, I have power, I say failed, but how is this a problem? If you consider it is a problem, don't come to the university. Don't go to CEGEP, because it's a professor that says, you fail, Gingras, you're not going to your university. So he has the power to stop me from university, but we're playing on words, you know, and that's the way the society is made. And this is confusion of bringing everything into the same bag. Another question. We have about 10 minutes. I need to translate it. It's related to the possibility of criticizing your university. So the question is in regard of the EDI politics, in where universities more and more have policies of respectful of the environment, between brackets, code of conducts for we qualify that are inclusive, respectful, and the person doesn't say, but a safe space, you know, a code of conducts in which a university should be an environment full of respect. How can the university, and the examples that you gave, they're really in the research. So I'm a psychologist. If I express myself in psychology, that's okay. But the question is on the university policy, the structure of university related to the EDE policies. I don't think we have that here in Quebec, but in the rest of Canada, we see that. And in the United States, we have a code of conducts for respect. So does this limit the possibility for professors to have a critical point of view towards their own institution? Yes, and according to the Law 32, we can use the Law 32 against this. And this brings me to say that the problem is, even when you have a law exists only if it's used. So if no one tests the law, it's not used. So for example, in the law, and we're really happy that we had this, that the universities as an institution cannot impose trigger warning to the professor. So the professor in his academic freedom can decide that in a class, he will tell to the customer that they can be the problematic for certain students. So according to respect, I'm totally against this concept, because the respect concept is a dangerous one. What does respect mean? 2 and 2 equals 5. I say you don't understand. It's 4. I'm not respecting you. If I say to an indigenous, he says that the spirit will inform you the propriety of a tree, I'm going to say no. Propriety of a tree is biochemistry and is on the spectrum of mass. Am I lacking of respect? So Respect is a word that we use to stop people. So the professor needs to say, no, I don't need to respect this. I don't mean what it means. I'm not going to insult you, but in a debate to show that their method or the ways of alternatives way of knowledge, you know, science today have different measures and they are universally. So we need to argument, and I think we can object and say that you can't impose this to me. Yes, safe space, the university imposed this. It does. I'm against safe spaces. This is absurd. This is to show that safe space and a trigger have no effect. So we need to be against this, but we need to oppose it. So a university, they say that by respect, we need to oppose it and bring the law 32 and use it and ask the union to tell the university that they have no right to tell me what to say in my class. So, you know, freedom of academic freedom, you know, I'm radical, but I'm pretty square when I hear something that's really ridiculous. I can be a bit mean, but respect, what is it, you know? Mafia as a concept of between us and the mafia, we respect ourselves. So the word doesn't mean much. And I'm going to ask that question because it's related directly with this. The hate speech. So we have laws. I'm not a lawyer. We have laws, but the person says that the argument of the hate speech is even broader to silence position. So do you have a reflection on? Yes, completely. And newspapers, they confuse, and I've read texts in Le Devoir, I said this is a mistake. They confound hate speech and consider from someone hate speech. So they think my speech is hateful, but the only way Pierre Trudel, a lawyer that says that in the only test is the court, and it's a judgment, the arrêt award of the Supreme Court. He was the person because he ridiculed young people. You know, Ward said, the judge said it was part of his freedom of speech. So hate speech is to frighten people. Okay, well, come in court. There was one student 15 years ago with one of my colleagues. He was my student in a doctorate with me and a colleague who brought us to the Commission of the People's Right as racist. I said, no problem, let's go. Of course, I won. Because, you know, I'm not racist. You need to demonstrate in the commission. So no, Gingras is nice. You know, he's not racist. So that was settled. But you can't be stopped or be frightened. The strategy of the group is to frighten you, say you're racist. So we need to say, okay, well, make a complaint if I'm racist. Go to court, bring me to court, and they won't go to court. And everybody who bow down are people that are more weak because they don't attack people that are perceived as strong. Yeah, this is all hateful, this is racist, this is Islamophobe. No, don't bow down. The multiplication of these phobia is a strategy to silence people. So we need to learn to defend our positions. People are the first to stay back and are coward, and they tell me, oh, you're courageous. I said, come on, why don't you do anything? No, but it's the same thing. We need to bring this, yeah. When we put these people to their place, we do different tests, and when you test them, they will take their hold. Yeah, say I'm racist, anything. Court will decide what's a hate speech, nobody else. Maybe a last question, and our next speakers will start. It's a question that's in English, but it's the question of the mission of the university. And one part, the open dialogue, you know, details, and this could be influenced by a culture of discipline. Let's say the culture in a social work is not the same as in psychology. So how can we separate this? And I would add also parallelly, and this is my question, it's related to the same question, is the mission of university in the slides you said it was a collectivity services. So could we say that the service to the collectivity could include the promotion of groups who would be more marginalized or less represented? I don't understand the service to the collectivity means that when you intervene because you want to serve the public, the university cannot sanction you. The people who said that they were censored because they promoted to the Ministry of Health, talking about race, systemic racism, they can say this, that this concept exists, but I have the right to say that this is so flu that it doesn't mean anything, but it's not true. The ministry didn't censor them. They didn't listen, and they had reason not to listen to them because they're talking about myth. They confuse myth with prejudge, stereotype. A stereotype is not a myth, is a stereotype. And a judgment is not a myth. So they had myth or reality. So this was child thing. So in the debate, in the public debate, you can promote anything. And we need to debate with arguments. And I want to defend argumenting. If you say this is systemic, what's the system? In Quebec, a system is the law. The law says that if you're discriminated, you go to court. So the juridic system does not encourage racism. It discourages systemically with a law that says that depending on the apartment, you can make a complaint. There's many systems that says against, so I'm against this concept. I'm not racist because I'm against this systemic racism that just recent. It's like unconscious bias. Well, you know, if you're an unconscious, I'm always right. So I'm against this things that are not clear, and it's my right. But don't say I'm grossophobe, I'm racist. We should stop that. We put our pants. We're in a hysterical phase. We need to stop it by standing upright in our boots. Yves, we're gonna have to stop. It's absolutely interesting. Many times, eventually the format we have today, and I'm talking more about the participants, is a series of presentations. At towards the end of the afternoon, will be like more exchange discussion. So I did the best I could to ask questions, but I can't ask them all. There's too many questions. So I'm really sorry for those who your questions weren't answered. Yves, we'll try to find a way that we can continue these discussions, maybe through additional exchanges or eventual debate within the months to come. Yves, thank you very much. Go back to your duties and work, and we will go with our next conference. You can disconnect, or we can leave you as participant if you want to listen to what's going to happen. Okay. Yeah, I have a bit of work to do, but thank you very much. Yeah, colleagues should be the priority. Yes, yes, for sure. Okay, so just shut your camera. Good, thank you.